Today I'm going to be sharing with you the Health Nugget. And for the Health Nugget, I thought this would be a good opportunity to share part of my testimony and how important it was, like the reason why I'm here today, and how God used cooking classes as very instrumental to my Christian experience, and how God can still use cooking classes today to bring the light of the gospel, to let your light shine from your household to those who are seeking something better. So my story begins, here's a photo of myself when I was about 12 years old. I was 210 pounds, I was borderline diabetic, high cholesterol, very depressed. Here I was at church. I didn't want to be at church. I was dragged there. You can see I wasn't very happy. In the photo on the left, I broke my arm, but they took a photo of me in like this children's class, and I would just sleep on the pews, and I wouldn't pay attention in the sermons. So what happened was I basically had the symptoms of a heart attack when I was 12 years old, and it freaked me out. And I wanted to know, what can I do to change? I saw I was standing on a precipice, and things were about I was about to walk off, and my life may never be the same again. So I started to apply some healthier principles, and I started to lose the weight. The next photo has a photo of myself with some Bible workers. They weren't studying with me, but this was over at a baptism. They were baptizing someone else. And so I was able to lose the weight through eating healthier. And since I was 12, I still never had any like sodas or coffee. Like I stopped drinking like energy drinks and donuts and things like that. But I was able to lose the weight, keep it off. But I still went back to some other unhealthy things, like this next photo. This is me when I was 15. If you can't tell, that's basically one bag of top ramen all in one fork. And so I ate a lot. The food that I ate, I didn't know at the time, it was very empty calorie. It wasn't nutritionally dense. And I went back to eating like cheese and meats and things, but that was me. I was hanging out with the wrong crowds. I had long hair, and I was hanging out with longboarders, skaters, hacky sackers, different things like that. But it was December 2011. A lot of things changed for me. I was going to some parties with college students while I was in high school, and I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I just got really depressed. And I was thinking, well, like, this is the lowest I've ever been. When was I the happiest? And I remembered it was those few times I was on fire for Christ. And I was really shocked at that, but I desired to search after God. I went to a camp, gave my heart to Christ at a youth camp in December. But when I came home, I read a book. That book was the National Sunday Law. And this was the first place where I actually learned about the importance of the Sabbath in the Word of God, and what God says about this as far as today. It was amazing. And I only had one copy. I read this book and I was like, this is amazing. I went back to the church where the Bible workers were, and this is the photo of that. And the pastor at the time was Pastor Brian. He was preaching at that time. He recognized me from when I was rebellious, sleeping in the pews, and his brother was actually the pastor when I was maybe like 14 or so. And I showed up. I brought, once I read that book, I immediately called my best friend. I said, Josh, you got to read this book. Come over to my house. Let's read it. And so I read it a second time with him. And then I was talking to my other friend. Her name is Danielle. I talked to her that night after I got back from the youth camp, and I was telling her about my experience at camp, my conversion experience. And she's like, wow, I want what you have. And she's like, how can I give my heart to Christ? And I was like, whoa, well, I'll meet you in the library. I'll show you what to do when we go to school the next day. She's like, okay, great. And so we read that National Sunday Law book together. So here I am this is what I looked like when I was going back to church again. Had the long hair still. I was a skater, and I showed up with all my friends. So in the next slide, you can see my best friend Josh and Danielle, and my mom is in the green. And so he sees me, and I'm with my friends. I'm there. It seems like I'm excited. I'm different, and I raised my hand during prayers and testimony. I said, I have a testimony, but it's kind of long, so I put my hand down. And so Sabbath school went forward, and it was just before the sermon. In that break time, he put his knee in front of the pew before me, and he's like, so I heard that you had a testimony, but it was longer. Would you be willing to give that testimony on for the service? And I was like, oh, what? I was like, no, it's like, I had a testimony, but it's not that long. And he said, well, no, that's okay. If it's, you take however long you need, and whatever you don't feel, I'll just share the message that I was planning on sharing. I'm like, oh, okay, that kind of made it easier for me. So I went up there my first day back at church, and that was where I gave my first sermon. I ended up sharing my testimony about how I gave my heart to Christ, and I went for about 40 to 45 minutes. That was the divine service for that day at church. And so there, while I was at church, I found out that week they were going to be having a cooking class. So what you see on the screen is the cooking class where the pastor was up there, and it was really neat because they played some documentaries. It was Food Inc. and Forks Over Knives, and they played one documentary, then they did a cooking demonstration, then they allowed me to eat what they demonstrated. And here is a photo of the plate of food. This was the meal that changed my life. The meal that changed my life. The reason why is because, look at it. It's simple. It is, it's small in portions. What they had was, they had an oat burger. It was a substitute burger patty, and homemade bread with some baklava, with honey, and they had oven-baked potatoes with homemade ketchup and some homemade cashew cheese on some chips, where I was like, whoa, I like burgers. And I had that, and before, you saw how much I ate with that, like, one bag of top ramen on a single, like, bite or spoon, forkful. But I ate this small meal, proportioned meal, and I was satisfied for like 5 hours afterwards. That never happened with my junk food. The fact that I can eat healthy food and be satisfied was incredible. I thought to myself, okay, I can do this. So I went home, changed my life, and totally got rid of the junk food in the house. Praise the Lord, my mom was supportive of that. We opened up a cookbook. They were cooking recipes out of a cookbook called the 10 Talents. Opened a cookbook, found out what are the ingredients that show up the most in the different recipes. And then Mom was explaining about staple foods. These are going to be our staple foods. And I was like, okay. So we wrote down what they were in these new recipes. So cashews are in a lot of recipes. Maybe some dried dates. There was weird stuff like nutritional yeast I've never heard before, but that made my cheese sauce taste so good. And just different things like that, where we started to make a list. We bought in bulk. We went to the grocery store and replaced a lot of the foods in our cupboards. We did that overnight. And because I showed up at every day of the cooking class, I was able to be put into this raffle along with all my friends, because we all did. And the raffle was whoever gets picked would receive the Natural Remedy Encyclopedia book. And I just so happened to be the one who received the book. And this book was amazing, because it's an encyclopedia of natural remedies for almost any problem or issue that you could possibly bring up. It was put together by several doctors. And so you just go through this big book, and you're like fever, heart disease, or multiple sclerosis, or maybe groggy sleep in the or sleepy feeling in the morning, just all sorts of stuff. I started to carry that with me everywhere I went in school. So the next slide you'll see, this is basically where my school was. It's the big buildings over there. In high school, I would bring my natural encyclopedia, my National Sunday Law book, and my friends, Josh and Danielle, we used our cookbook. We started preparing health reformed food at home, went to school, and we had like a potluck together. And we would invite, instead of going out hacky sacking during lunch, I would go to the hacky sack and invite my friends to eat our potluck together, because the school system didn't have any healthy food that we wanted to eat. And so we would invite people to come and eat with us, teach about health, and quickly I became known as I still have people calling me from high school today asking, remember that book, that Natural Remedy Encyclopedia book you had? Can you look up this? I have a neighbor or a cousin or a mother that's going through this. And I'll be like, yeah, look it up, send a photo, and send it to them. And because the students would constantly go to us asking us health questions, and they'd eat our food, and we'd have a book club reading the National Sunday Law book. And keep in mind, I only had one copy, and let's go back. I only had one copy with that of the National Sunday Law book, and I was just sharing that with everybody I possibly could. But at the back of the book, I found out, well, you're able to buy 1,000 for 50 cents each. I'm like, huh. I had just given up video games right after Black Friday and spending hundreds of dollars. So days later, just sold all the video games and had like $700 and something worth. And I wanted to dedicate that to the Lord's servant. I said, Lord, it's like, I just want to give this to you. Whatever you want to be done with it, we're going to use it for your service. And so for that $500, I bought 1,000 National Sunday Laws. And now we can go back. And so I had a box of books that was taller than myself sitting there in our living room. And I wrote a letter to the author, Jan Markinson, and I told him, I have with one copy, this is what we're doing. And he's like, okay. I bought 1,000 and he gave me 1,200. And then the next week, he sent another box of 100. The next week, another box. Next week, another box. I was like, I paid for 1,000 and he gave me an extra 500. I was like, this is amazing. So the next slide, what we ended up doing is we hit the streets with my friends and some new students that we were studying with at the school. The neighborhood surrounding our high school, we would go door to door and giving out these National Sunday Law books in just teams of people. And this is like months or weeks within like giving my heart to Christ. We are naturally sharing it with other people. And honestly, almost every single house that you see on that map right now received National Sunday Laws at their doorstep. On the top right corner, you see that's a trailer court, and those are lots of trailers side by side. There was several hundred National Sunday Laws that were given to every one of those houses very quickly. And we were able to interact and dialogue with some of the people, and we met opposition, but we kept pressing forward. And we knocked on the doors of Satanists, we knocked on the doors of Baptists, of all sorts of different people, and it was a great experience. But that's just what happened. So later on, moving forward, it was June 2013. Now this is maybe 2 years later. Turned 18 shortly afterwards. Moved into the church in Central Point, Oregon. There, I lived there for the next 2 years. Pastor Brian was my roommate, and we would do Bible work together. And he was him and his brother were teaching me how to do pastoral labor, And so we continue to do Bible work with the church, online media ministry, as well as like assistant pastoral work. In October of 2014, we were, Brian and I were bachelors, so we had to cook our own foods and meals and everything. So taking what I learned from the cooking classes and expounding on that more and more, was making different recipes. And here's one of a easy bake. What was that? It was a banana breakfast cookie, and our ministry actually put together a recipe for that, and just post some photos on social media. A lot of people were interested in the recipe. Give a recipe. And the other two photos, we see that there was I missed Nutella. And I was like, where can I find some Nutella? So I was looking on Amazon. I was trying to find some. And I found a carob Nutella. And I looked at the recipes. I'm like, wait a second. This is just like sweetener, macadamia nuts, and carob powder. I'm like, and salt. That sounds pretty simple. I could probably make this myself. So found it, like, kind of experimented with a food processor, made our own Nutella, and shared that. It was a big hit on Sabbath fellowship lunch, and more people wanted the recipes. So there were a variety of different things that we were making together. But the next month, the Lord took me on the road. November 2014, we did some Walk to Scott Ministries was doing some speaking engagements, doing a speaking tour down through California. We went to Lancaster, spoke during their youth Sabbath. We also there's some photos in Strathmore. What happened was I went to a prayer meeting in Porterville and did it on Tree Education. The very last day, there was a large group coming I did a prayer meeting in Delano, California, and a large group came from Porterville. They sat in at the very end of it, and they liked so much what they heard, they asked, would you be able to do some meetings over in Strathmore? We can set it up and invite the people, and you can keep doing that for the next 2 weeks. And I said, sure, I'd be willing to do that. And they said, when is the earliest you can start? It was like, we can start tonight. And they were like, okay. It's like, well, we're not ready quite yet with there. Let's start on Sunday, because it was Friday night when that happened. And so Sunday, for the next 2 weeks, we did meetings, a meeting every day. And on the left, you see there's a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, Christine and Abby, that were able to be the translator for the presentation. That was a really precious experience. Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise, is the verse that Victoria shared with us just recently. And then different members of the Porterville group, they were able to be interpreters for their very first time. It was a time of great growth for all of us. So the next slide, we started going over the subjects. There was one that's called Diet and Spirituality, where Erica was translating. But what I found is that as I was teaching these principles on health in the Bible, I was showing them what God says about the fat and the blood, and about eating things on the third day, or how in the New Testament God says don't eat things that are strangled, and just showing them different principles that they've never seen before. And you can see the conviction, the earnest, the willingness on their minds. There was a butcher who was in the audience. He raised his hands, and I called on him, and he's like, well, I just want to say that I have been a butcher for 7 months. For 7 years, and everything that young man said is true. And that was really powerful, because I was mentioning how it takes months between the time that the animal is killed to the time that we actually eat the meat or buy it from the grocery store. They pump it full of blood and preservatives to keep it from looking rotten. And he's like, yes, I can confirm that. So at that meeting, I started to see that they were eager. They wanted to accept the truth, But then you can see it on their face. They're like, what am I going to eat now? How am I going to do this? What do I do? And so I was just thinking, wow, there needs to be something more than just a sermon, something more than just health education. And I remember Friday evening, I was sitting down, and all the mothers just swarmed me. They were all surrounding this table I was sitting at, and they looked at me and they said, what do you eat? And because they saw that my diet was different. And I said, well, I eat a lot of the same stuff, just anything that that you eat, I would eat. Just I use substitutes. So I'll eat macaroni and cheese, or I'll have I'll eat some burgers, or I'll eat granola or different things. And they were just like, the next question, do you know how to cook? I was thinking about the different meals that I was posting on social media the month before. So I said, yeah. Then the question, can you teach us? And that really hit home, because I started to realize how important the healthful food preparation is to teaching new believers or new people who are interested in health. And so what we ended up doing was we did a cooking class on how to make a pizza, a dairy-free pizza with cheese substitutes and different things that follows health reforms. So we used, someone in the house had a 10 talent cookbook, and they opened up the cookbook, and we used the recipe out of there to make the pizza crust. And then the Lord used the cashew cheese recipe that I learned when I was 16 in the cooking class to be able to be a cheese base. We boiled it down so it was thicker, and it was nice because they had a lot of children. So what we would do is I would give them the different recipes. They were all taking notes, and the children would be the ones who made the dough, who made the cheese, who used the blender, who did everything. And so they put everything together, and the parents were watching, and we made the pizza, and we all shared that together. And so that was one of the first cooking classes that I've ever done. It might have been the first one. And it was a really good experience. Then in December, I came... they ended up... The photo that you saw on that last slide... Salvador and Abby, these are the two friends over there. They ended up making the pizza again, and they took a photo of the pizza that recipe they learned, and they sent it to me. Here's Salvador. He's been wanting to step away from cheese for quite some time. He knows he should be, but he just wasn't there yet. He needed to learn some substitutes to help him to transition, to make that taste bud transition. And so this was a good experience. He was taking photos. Him and Abby were happy that they were able to do that. They wanted to show me. So in December, this next month, what do? We go home, and in our missionary meetings, we start doing cooking classes for our community in Central Point, Oregon. And here we're putting together different invitations. We have a Steps of Christ, a health DVD. We have an invitation to the cooking class, and a few other things that we have them on door hangers. So we're inviting them out to the community that way. And that was really fun. The next slide, we see that there was, here we are having vegan cooking classes. And this was the crew, some of the cooks. We wanted to help the church to climb higher in health reform. So to involve them in healthful preparation, it encouraged them to learn more recipes, and we were able to put them together. And we have Ricky over here on the media booth doing some recordings. One of the recipes that we did was how to make vegan butter, and this recipe we posted on YouTube. It's very interesting. If you can see, YouTube gives us analytics, and on the bottom left we see that there was over, at the time in 2017, there was almost 8,000 views who watched that cooking demonstration. And think about having, like, in the audience, there might have been like 10 or 20 or so, but in our true audience, there was a sea of 8,000 people. And with the media ministry, notice the countries that we're being able to reach. We were able to reach the United Kingdom, India, Germany, Trinidad and Tobago, Malaysia, Philippines, Jamaica, France, South Africa, Netherlands, Hong Kong, Sweden, Indonesia, Japan, Brazil. Look at all of these countries. And in the bottom right corner with that red box, there was over 145 countries, geographic locations that were reached through the cooking class by recording it and posting it online. It's amazing, through modern publishing, the great sea of people that are able to be reached with the gospel. This was one of our most watched videos on our YouTube channel. And so that came as a result of these cooking classes. So in July, we had started in June to December, we started a missionary training school. Here were some of the students. One of them was from France, the other one from Virginia, another one from California. There's Salvador again. You may have remembered him from the Porterville meetings. That was the first time that I ever met him. Now he's coming as a student, and him and I were doing a demonstration together. Those were very educational times. In April 2016, we went to Vote for Health. Andrew and I traveled over there, and so we wanted to share health with a congressman. We visited all 256 congressional offices, going office to office, going through the Senate, the House of Representatives, and we did health meetings on the lawn of the Capitol building. You can see that in the next slide. It was really amazing because there's a lot of foot traffic in DC, and there's people coming off the streets that see what we're doing. They come, they listen, they learn about the 8 laws of health, they listen to a demonstration, and we're able to go through. It's basically like what I experienced when I was 16, but we're just doing it on a bigger scale with trying to reach the higher classes. So in July of 2017, we that was last year, Walks with God Ministries went on the road again, and we started doing some health meetings. Here we were doing a health meeting in southern Washington, and we were doing it in someone's house and going through a presentation, and from there we invited them to attend a camp meeting with us up north. And we can see the photos with at the camp meeting. Michael, Mariah, Lisa, they're over here. We're driving in the woods. This is in northern Idaho now, and we're actually going to the baptism of Martelena. Because she attended the health meeting in Washington, she was invited to go to the camp meeting in Idaho, where she decided to give her heart to Christ and to recommit her life to Christ and to be baptized. These health meetings are very influential. They're able to make a powerful impact in the lives of others. In August, we continued doing some meetings. We did, on our way back from the speaking tour, Christina was doing the lesson study in Pasadena. I was invited to do the divine service, and that Sabbath, we later on did meetings during that week, the next week in Palmdale, and we were doing a health meeting. There I was, and then Victoria and Christina, they were teaching about health, and Victoria did a cooking demonstration. She was showing people how they can make some healthful foods, and following the health presentation with a modern publishing presentation. she was going through just the powers of modern publishing. And if you haven't seen that presentation, you got to check it out. We really see that health is the entering wedge. And through the health message, you're able to have access to a class of people that you otherwise would never be able to talk to. So we need to have the relation of health as the right arm is to the body. The right arm is the health message. That's what opens doors. And then the body is the gospel that's able to walk through those doors as a result of combining the medical missionary work together. And so for 2018, Walks with God Ministries, we plan on doing much more cooking classes here in Central California Valley. We are planning on going on the road with the medical missionary merchant van, or the medical missionary van, and we'll be able to do some more health presentations and cooking classes, and I can stand before you and let you know that I'm here today because of a cooking class. You may be here because of a cooking class. And even if you aren't, you can be a part of cooking classes that will bring others to a closer knowledge, a saving knowledge of the truth for this time, the everlasting gospel of Christ that he desires to go to all the world. And so I wanted to share with you for the Health Nugget that this is a wonderful time we're living in, that we can share with people in ways that we never could before. So you can participate in doing your own cooking classes, or you can support those who are doing cooking classes, who are doing health presentations. We can do so much more together than we ever could apart. So thank you for watching and your time.